Perfect. Welcome everyone to the second live Q&A of this DDF, the February 24th DDF challenge. Obviously, I'm not Marty, and I'm certainly not Bob. I do have a Bob. I mean, that's as close as we're going. So normally Bob would be here to cover, but he had something come up last minute, and so he would love to be here and go over day 10, his favorite day in the whole world, mine too. But he isn't able to be here, so I'm going to walk you through some of the cues and some of the slides. Marty has a pre-recorded section of these slides. If you go into DDF, into the course feed, the live Q&As, it currently says not live Q&A number 2. That'll change in a bit, but it is number 2. And there will be a video at the top that is Marty's pre-recorded version of these slides. You can always watch both and compare, or you can, watch whichever one you want. If anybody's seeing this live, you will know that there's 2 versions. After this presentation is done, then we'll get it uploaded in, so there'll be both options. So this is the second week Q&A for DDF. So I'll go through some of the slides that Marty had prepared. And then, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll get to them. And we'll also have a chance for some live questions at the end. And let me see, let's share the screen and hope the computer catches up. There we go. All righty. So, DDF challenge Q&A number 2. That's just in case we forget where we are. So the first part that we've done so far is the baselining, the first 3 days, and getting an eye kind of on your current foods and meals, which would be by checking your post-meal blood glucose and seeing sort of which ones are giving you that bigger rise. And right now we're kind of in the final stages of hunger training, which is the next so many days after your baselining. And the goal is to basically see if you can eat just below your trigger or at your trigger if you have to, and to give you a little practice before we move on to the next stage. And after that will be the curb your late night binging, which is eating a bit more protein earlier in the day. And the next section will be the main meal versus discretionary meal, and then optimizing eating routine. So that's kind of the big picture overview of where we're going. And I know everybody who is newer is kind of when will my trigger start to drop? I'm good at this. I can do this one particular number. Please, can it drop soon? And that's usually what everybody, when they're newer, it's once you've been through your first or second DDF, and you've been here for a while, then it's please don't let it drop too fast. It's because, the 30 days can be very long. So anyway, after the 3 days of baselining and the 5 days of hunger training, the trigger will start to drop. So you should see this probably Monday, Tuesday, just depending when you started. And the trigger will start to decrease. It's using the average of the past week of your pre-meal blood glucose value. So when you finish hunger training, your trigger will adjust slightly based on if you were way below your trigger or not. It'll adjust a bit more than it will for the rest of the challenge. Then after Monday or Tuesday, your trigger will start to decrease based on the average of the past 7 days of your pre-meal blood glucose values. So if you are at most or below, more often than not, if you're below your trigger when you eat, you don't have to go too far. It will start to decrease, and the maximum drop is about 0.5% per day. So if for some reason your trigger is a little high at the beginning, don't worry, it will catch up to you probably quicker than you want it to. And it will kind of push you just a little So if you are lucky enough to manage to kind of keep a little below your trigger line, it will start dropping until it meets you. And then you have to work a little harder and a little harder. And the goal is to give you a gentle, the goal is to give you a gentle nudge to going a little bit lower as you go through the 30 days. And that's what's going to bring about all the changes and slowly drain off the extra fuel in the fuel tank. So don't worry, it will drop soon enough. And usually, no matter where you start, if you're doing the challenge, following the daily lessons, by week 3, week 4, you're pretty much, are we almost done? I think I need a break. And it's guaranteed to get that way for pretty much everybody who does it, no matter where you start. Just to quickly do a recap, this is the minimum effective dose of testing chart that you can find in the Getting Started guide if you want a general overview of what things look like. We've already finished baselining, which is a lot more tracking than we do for the rest of the challenge. We're in hunger training, and we're on Saturday here. So hunger training, we're doing the pre-meal glucose testing. If you find your post-meal glucose is not rising too much, then we don't have to test it pretty much for the rest of the challenge. I'll get into that a bit more later. So right now we're just testing pre-meal glucose for hunger training. And on Sundays, each week during the month, we'll do the biometrics, your weight, body fat, selfie for yourself, and waist. And then after that, we'll be working into the eating window where we'll test the waking again for that week and the pre-meal. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in the next couple slides. So it's like this is kind of the baselining, hunger training, eating window is what we'll be moving into next week. And then we'll go into the other sections in the following weeks. So day 10, this is Bob's favorite day, and it really is mine too. Day 10, if you find as you're doing your hunger training that you're getting a bit later in the morning to eat because your glucose is a little higher and you're struggling to get all your food in before the day is over with, the main meal is going to be your best friend. Also, if you do like some stronger or intense activity and you're hungry afterwards, but your trigger isn't quite where you want it to be, and you don't want to derail your day's plans, then the main meal is a great option for that. So on day 10, which I think is Tuesday, you can lock in one meal a day if you're eating more than one meal and use your trigger for other meals. So this means that you can pick one meal if you eat 2 or 3 times a day. And that meal, whether you schedule it around your exercise or whether it's a family meal in the evening, it's your choice. You pick that one time and that will be your main meal. So you can eat it when you feel hungry and you don't have to test beforehand. So your fingers will thank you. And the rest of the meals, you still need to reach your trigger. You still want to try and reach your trigger for those. So you don't have to test for your main meal, but you can test on your other ones. So if you eat twice a day, like I have my main meal as my first meal in the morning, because if I wait to get to trigger, I'm eating too late in the day and I end up losing sleep because I'm up late at night eating at like 8 or 9 o'clock. So it's like that doesn't work. So if I make my main meal at 10, I have my next meal at 6, life is good. So if you have like a family dinner or a first meal of the day like I do, or if you have an exercise routine and you want to get your food in around that time, the main meal is a great option to have around your exercise, because if you do an intense workout, you want to eat as soon as you start to feel hungry after that workout. And we'll get into that more in the next slide, but the main meal is perfect for that. You only will need to test before the other meals that are not your main meal. The main meal does not have to be bigger. It's just the meal that you put in your routine so that you can anchor your day. You don't have to test for the main meal. So that's that one. Now, a lot of people are starting to find that their glucose sometimes can rise even though they haven't eaten. And so why glucose rises when we don't eat? Glucagon and insulin and everything else in your body rises with the circadian rhythm. So in the morning, when your circadian rhythm basically starts to rise right before you wake up, glucagon in your system will rise and it will push out glucose that's already stored in your system to help you start the day. The problem is if you have any level of insulin resistance, your blood glucose may rise a bit more in the morning than it would for a regular person, because there's not quite enough insulin to balance it out. And it's okay if you want to wait this out until you use up the extra store of glucose. So if you want to wait until you get down to your trigger before you eat, that's okay. But if you find that it's taking too long and you're getting like close to lunchtime and you're like, this isn't working, I need to eat today sometime, that's a case where you may want to put your main meal first thing in the day, or you want to make sure that when you do eat, that your first meal is more protein and nutrient focused, like your non-starchy veggies, and not as much fat and carbs. Only because you have enough fuel on board with your glucose being higher, but you do need protein. If you're really hungry, lock in your main meal earlier in the day. If your glucose is above trigger and you're really, really hungry, then focus on more protein and nutrients and a little less fat and carbs. So you can kind of see here on the graph, like the insulin secretion for a regular person goes up in the morning. Actually, we'll look on the lower chart. The insulin, the glucagon, both on a regular person who's metabolically healthy goes up in the morning, dips a little bit in the afternoon, and then rises again. Whereas if somebody is type 2 diabetic, the insulin secretion for them doesn't go up. You don't get that bump. So basically, you get the bump of the glucose going into the bloodstream, but the insulin doesn't rise like it does down here. So that way, that's how come you get like a little bit more in your bloodstream. But as your body you start to dial back the fuel in your system, it will start to over time, kind of as you get more metabolically healthy, that rise may be a little bit less. But in the meantime, know that it can be higher the first few hours of the morning, and that can be normal for some people, and that's called dawn phenomenon. And I believe, have that mentioned in the lesson somewhere. If not, we can drop the blog will be in the FAQs, has a link to the blog of that as well. So that is the first thing in the morning. The next question is, do I need to reduce carbs? And basically, you don't need to eliminate carbs, but you don't want to overfuel your glucose fuel tank either. So if your post-meal blood glucose is above the upper limit in your hourly glucose chart, i.e. if it's above 30 milligrams per deciliter or 1.6 millimoles per liter above your trigger, then you should probably look to either eliminate or reduce or eat less of that particular meal. You can dial back the carbs a little bit or the quantity, depending. If all of your post-meal readings are below the upper limit line, like here is the upper limit line, the upper limit line there is 7, so these measurements here are above. If the others are all below the upper limit line, then you can just focus on your pre-meal testing and skip the post-meal testing. And you won't have to poke yourself quite as much after that. The reactive hypoglycemia, the reason why we want the post-meal to be less than 30 milligrams or 1.6 is because if you eat a little too much for your body, and it's different for everyone, then you're going to go up above the upper limit, which is going to have a corresponding drop or crash, which is going to come down usually a lot faster than if you have less carbs. So it will go a lot higher and drop a lot faster. And then you're going to be super extra hungry and probably wanting to eat a little bit sooner. So that's what we're trying to avoid there. The typical rise after meals in most of the optimizers in the DDF app is probably about 0.9 millimoles or 15 milligrams per deciliter. So it's pretty much kind of in this part of the chart here. If you're above, again, you might want to dial back carbs a little bit until you get into this range. And some people who find they're eating a bit more protein and having a protein focused meal first thing in the morning, sometimes they'll even find that their glucose falls a little bit. And they're kind of like, wait a minute, I thought it was supposed to go up. And that's just a bit of the protein signaling in the body and bringing the extra glucose down. So that's okay too. From there, once you've got your rise after eating in this window here, less than 30 milligrams, you want to focus on dialing back your energy from fat or carbs. So the normal range, again, like say most people who did the poll were in the 15 to 30 range afterwards. The normal amount, it's good to have a bit of a curve of the after you eat carbohydrates. You want to have the glucose go up a little bit. That helps with your satiety. It helps with hormone signaling. It tells your brain and your body that, we have food coming in. This is a good thing. So it's like having a curve is a good thing. We don't want to flatline everything, but you just don't want it to go too high. So if you have a normal low amount of a curve and like a gentle dip, that's when your hunger comes. And if you have the right amount of carbs and fat, it will get up for a few hours and then eventually dip back down again. So that's kind of where we are trying to go. And the higher carb and fat foods will make that curve a little bit higher and stay above our trigger for a little bit longer. So this whole process is just a gentle bringing it back. The hourly glucose chart, you don't want to push through your hunger if your blood glucose is below your trigger. If you're just barely below, that's okay. You don't have to be really far below. We're trying not to push too hard because then otherwise you're going to be really, really hungry and then you're going to have trouble stopping eating something. If your glucose, try to avoid or reduce the amount of foods that seem to spike your glucose. And if your glucose is in the morning is lower, then you can add a little bit more food earlier and reduce that at night. And I believe we've got some charts coming up here in a second that will get into those examples a bit more. So if your glucose is higher in the morning, you can have a choice of either delaying a little bit longer to eat, or you can have a higher protein percent meal if you're super hungry, which means a little bit less energy from carbs and fat, and that will help bring it down a little bit. If your waking glucose is high, you can consider eating maybe a little bit less at night or finishing eating earlier. And we'll get into that more as we go forward here. The hourly, you see, I just want to check one thing. Yeah. Late night binging or eating too late at night. If you find you're kind of extra hungry in the evening, you may want to front load protein and nutrients in the morning. Having like a bigger portion of protein or a more protein focused meal earlier in the day will help to balance your hunger a bit better throughout the day, and you won't be looking for energy as late in the evening after you have dinner. It can take some time also to find a routine that works for you. And the goal really is to try and keep your blood glucose in the range of, just below the trigger without trying to overfill too much. And you're going to have days where this doesn't work quite as well. And it takes a little bit of practice to get a rhythm and a routine that works for you because your schedule is different, your body is different, the foods you like are different. And let me see. The other thing is, just chase your trigger. If most of your blood glucose readings are below trigger, then you only need to test pre-meal. So again, once you get the majority of them below the upper limit line, just test your pre-meal and give your fingers a break. Now, the hourly glucose charts, we see 2 or 3 different versions. Most people, if they eat like a lower carb pattern, they will see usually a higher waking glucose, and that will gradually start to fall through the day. And those people, if they have see this sort of pattern to their chart, they may want to have a bit more protein in the morning and a bit more protein focused. And then later in the evening, maybe add in a little bit more carbs. The other pattern here to the side it's lower waking and lower morning glucose that starts to rise through the day. Those people usually are eating a bit of a higher carb pattern with maybe a little bit less fat. And then for that case, you might want to have a little bit more carbs and a little bit more food in the morning and ease back a little bit at night. And the next one, see, it's a little bit repetitive. Do I need to test after eating? Again, if the majority is under the 30 mil or the upper limit on your chart, then you don't need to test after your meals. Exercise is one of the other things that will raise glucose. If it's intense exercise, it will definitely increase your glucose because your body is realizing that you put a demand on it. And so it's dumping some stored glucose into your system. So it could be a few hours after you do an intense workout before your glucose will come back to trigger. So that's why we say that exercise is good, but it really can affect your glucose. And if you do a lot of workouts, like every morning or whatnot, you may want to have your main meal around that time. It's better to eat the large meal close to your workout if you're hungry, or as soon as you feel hungry when you're done working out. Gentle exercise, on the other hand, like if you take a walk or you're, puttering around the yard, that would usually cause your glucose to fall. So if you test and you're not quite at trigger, you can like take a walk with the dog and, come back in a half hour, an hour and check, and you probably will be down to where you want it to be. So another option here that Marty mentions is to test before your workout and use that number to guide your meal choices after you work out, because the numbers, your glucose is going to be automatically higher after the workout. So light exercise, gentle exercise will drop your glucose to allow you to eat a little bit sooner. It's not cheating. It's basically using your body to use up the stored glucose so that you can eat a little bit sooner. Intense exercise will definitely boost your glucose for a few hours afterwards. So if you feel hungry, definitely eat. And some hacks or tips to lower your glucose: go for a walk. Stress, meditate, breathing, relaxation. These are really good because stress can raise your glucose even if you don't eat anything relating to the cortisol. And eating a higher protein percent meal earlier in the day will definitely help stabilize your glucose through the day. Marty likes, there's a lot of apps out there that do relaxation and guided breathing. He likes the I Breathe app, and he can set like different dials as far as the number of seconds for inhale and hold and exhale, etc., to help relax and de-stress when the mind gets a little too busy. I use Headspace. I enjoy the voices of the people on there, so that's just my preference. But like whatever works, there's a lot of free apps out there. If you find that you need to kind of just focus and relax a little bit and do some breathing exercises, there's a lot of options out there to help. A good walk in nature definitely helps with that too. Waking glucose is an indication of how much energy that you're holding in storage. And waking glucose is usually the last thing to come down, like as you're gaining your metabolic health back. And if you want to lose weight, it's probably going to be the last thing to fall into place. So you may be doing everything right and it may be high for a while. So it's an indication of how much energy you're holding in storage in your body. So if your body fat stores are full, the energy overflows into your bloodstream. And also a higher fat meal at night or eating a little bit later in the evening can also cause a higher waking glucose. So the best way to reduce the waking glucose is to keep working by chipping away at your pre-meal trigger. And after, I think it's Tuesday of this week coming up, you'll start to see some lessons on closing the window on your eating window, and are you eating too late at night? And that's another way to help reduce waking glucose a little bit as well. So waking glucose of less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, or 5.6 millimoles per liter is ideal. A little bit higher is okay if you're really low carb. Sometimes that naturally happens. It's a physiological high for that particular case. But as you can see, the waking glucose here is probably trending around 100 with some below, some a little above, and some a little bit higher. So that's basically a graph based off some optimizer values. Waking glucose is influenced by how late you ate your last meal. Earlier is better. And also what you ate. Less fat will sometimes usually lower your waking glucose because fat doesn't give you a bigger spike right after your meal, but it can keep your glucose higher for hours. So if you overdo the fat a little too much, or if you eat a little too late in the evening, that might be causing your waking glucose to be a little bit higher. So this week coming up, that's kind of what we're focusing on to try and see, can we adjust it so that we bring it down a little bit? And each week kind of has a different focus on that. Overall, waking glucose is a long-term gain. So it will reduce as you chase a lower trigger and you lose body fat over time. And of course, Muffy, sorry, we're famous. He has all of your charts in here. I know. See, you'll be a rock star here for years to come. But as Marty would say, Muffy is a spirit animal, and as she chased her waking glucose, her premeal glucose, sorry, over a couple of years here, basically, it's a long-term process, and it's gradually going down for the weight and the waist to height. The waking glucose also settled down, body fat, and I'm not sure if you folks can see the pictures over here, her before and after, but definitely some progress there by just basically focusing on what she's doing on a daily basis. And am I only burning fat when I'm below trigger? And it's like, well, no, not exactly. You're always burning a combination of fat and glucose in your body. The level depends on your activity and the day and your body composition, etc. The glucose has to be used first, though. And so as glucose is depleted in your bloodstream, your body will then turn to use more fat. And if you're not eating too much fat in your diet, then your body will eventually get over to body fat. Just let me see if that's still okay. So yeah, that's basically the goal, is to dial back the glucose. That's why we're waiting until we get to the trigger. And in this process, you'll dial back your carbs a little bit, and you'll dial back the fat in your food a little bit. And as you do that slowly over time, you'll start to tap in to the body fat that you have, and it will start to burn some of that off. And that's why as you chase your trigger over time, your body starts to burn that off and people lose weight. And that's kind of the gentle process of DDF. And the messages that you'll see, usually in the DDF app, are based on your glucose. And so if you're post-meal, if you're checking and you enter it and it's well above the upper limit, it'll say you've overfilled your glucose tank. Next time, you should try to eat a little bit more or eat something else. And if you're above significantly, it'll say before in your pre-meal, it'll be like, wait, you don't need to eat yet. You've still got plenty of fuel. And if you're just above trigger, it's like, ideally, you can wait to eat. And then there's eat normally and prioritize enough carbs. So basically, if you're really, really hungry and you're still above your trigger and you're like, I have to eat now, then you probably want to have a meal that's mostly protein with like a little bit of fat and carbs, because your body already has enough fuel. And the extra protein, though, you definitely need protein. The rescue carbs is if you happen to wait a little too long and you're like, oops, I'm way below trigger. Then in that case, if you've gone further than what you should have eaten and you're like, I'm really, really hungry and in that case, you want to add a few starchy carbs, like maybe some potato or rice or pumpkin, without the added fat, to quickly boost the glucose out of that hunger zone. Otherwise, you're going to overeat. And I usually tell people when they ask that if you realize, oh, I'm way below my trigger, then usually while I'm assembling my food, I'll grab like a few carbs and munch on them while I'm getting my food ready. And that kind of helps me keeps me steady, my glucose steady until I get to my meal, and then I just eat my regular meal. So for me, that seems to work. But I eat fairly low carb, so I don't need that much to bump it back up again. But basically, yeah, if you realize you've overshot and you've gone a little too low, add a few non-starchy carbs and to bump it back up again so that you don't end up overeating and cleaning out your fridge. And okay, questions. So let's stop that one. Perfect. Okay, so that was all of the prepared stuff. And okay, so do we have any questions? Nothing too much there.
No.
Colleen said, dreading the drop. Yeah, yeah, it does happen. And Eileen was, oh, no video with traveling. Definitely, definitely. So anyway, we've opened the floor. Anybody have any questions, any live things? Oh, Marie, yeah, sorry, I couldn't see your hand there. Yep.
No worries. Yeah, I'm just checking. Can you give us good examples of when your glucose has gone too low and you're told to increase your starchy carbs, other than potato, rice, and pumpkins? Can you give us some good examples that we can use?
Um, Butternut squash, sweet potato. If you eat bread and stuff like that, like I don't eat grains or that because I'm sensitive to them. But if you eat like bread or rice or something that has starch in it, you don't want fruit because fruit, there's nothing wrong with it, but fruit has it's part glucose and part fructose, and that has to go through your liver before it hits your bloodstream. So it's better to do the starchy carb. That will work better. Like my mom was a type 2 diabetic, and if she was like dropping too low too fast, it was like you had to get the starch in to stop her from passing out, right? So but yeah, like if I test and my triggers, I don't know, say my trigger is 4.8, and I would normally try to eat around 4.7, and oops, I'm at 4.4. It's like, holy cow, it's too low. So while I'm heating up my food, I've got for me some almond crackers that have some starchy carbs in them, and I'll have like around 5 grams of carbs. But that's because I eat really low carbs, so I don't need that much to bump it up. I only eat about 50 grams of carbs a day. So if you're somebody who's eating like some fruit and some veggies and like, maybe 100 or 150 grams of carbs a day, then you'd probably want 10 or 15 grams to try that. And you'll find sort of what works for you. But whether it's like a couple of crackers or some sweet potato or some butternut squash, like I have some in the freezer, so it would take me less than a minute to get it. But you can add a little extra to your meal, but I find it works better if you have a little bit while you're getting your meal together so it doesn't keep dropping further. Because once it gets to that point, I find I eat my meal and then I need almost a second meal because I don't feel like I've eaten enough and I'm just like kind of climbing the wall and trying not to pass out. So that's what I find. But I don't know if Muffy, if you have any suggestions or anything that works for you.
Well, when I come home from teaching swimming or the gym, I am famished. I don't even know how to explain how hungry I am. And I have some crackers that I will eat while I'm making dinner because if I don't put something in my mouth, it's not going to be pretty. So crackers, I sometimes will have a piece of cheese, a little piece of cheese, like a Baby Bell with the cracker. But
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Is something like multigrain bread, because I do eat a bit of carbs, is slice of multigrain bread okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
Just like if you overshoot, you just want enough to kind of pop it back close to the normal to your trigger. Because if it keeps going down, you're going to eat, and you're going to pass your trigger, and still you're really going to feel like you need to eat to kind of overcompensate. And then it
Yeah.
will take a while to get back down again. And we're trying to sort of avoid that roller coaster. So yeah, definitely. Ideally, and it'll take a little time to kind of find your Not everybody realizes right away kind of like when they're hungry. It takes a while to recognize your hunger signals sometimes because we get used to ignoring them. So it'll take a little bit to kind of realize, oh, I'm usually hungry here. And
Thank you.
then it'll be okay. So yeah, definitely, definitely.
Do you see Lee?
Lee. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said, do you see Lee?
Yep, yep. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's when you're recording, sometimes it's hard to see the hands up. So I've got Muffy here helping me out. I appreciate it, Muffy. Lee, go ahead.
Hi, so I hope you don't mind, but I have a couple of questions. I'm new to the whole
Sure.
thing. I started on the 24th, the challenge on the 24th, and I'm coming from high fat keto, so I'm a little bit confused. So my first question is, if I get up in the morning and I'm not at trigger or just above it, like 1 or 2 clicks above it, then I can't have anything except like maybe water, coffee, tea. Is that correct? And continue to wait to get to the trigger? Because I like my coffee with cream. And so I'm assuming that I shouldn't have a cup of coffee with cream in it if I haven't reached my trigger in the morning. I should wait. Is that right?
Yes. Normally we're, except for like this week coming up, I think we'll start testing waking again. But like if you wake up in the morning up until I think it's Tuesday, you don't have to check your waking number yet. So if you wake up in the morning, if you feel hungry and you want to eat, then you would normally check. If you have a habit of having coffee with cream in the morning, yeah, if basically if it's a teeny splash of cream, like maybe less than 40 or 50 calories, Marty usually says that's kind of okay.
Yeah,
Black
that's
coffee is
cute.
usually fine. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If
That's no, it's more like, like it's a
cream
lot. It's
with a
like
little
3
coffee.
table. Yeah, it's cream with a little splash of coffee in it. Exactly. So it's like 3 or 4 tablespoons. Today I managed through a cup of coffee with only 3. So I am consciously trying to lower, the cream because I know that's a problem, but I'm trying
Yeah,
to figure out
yeah,
how to get my morning going. I miss it.
yeah,
And it's not even that I like coffee so much. It's kind of like the comfort of having the warm, creamy,
yeah.
Swedish kind of, thing. So okay. So
It's
if
a
I'm
hug in a cup. It's
right,
and a little boot for the
exactly.
morning.
And I test in
Um,
the morning only out of like habit, because I've been doing it for the last year while I was doing high fat keto. So
yeah,
so I
yeah.
do know what and I just kind of do it on autopilot. It doesn't really bother my fingers. I just, rotate. But um so is it really a big deal that I'm still doing it? Should I stop it so that I take advantage? Because I do realize that I'm having some uh trouble like with the like I never know when I'm hungry. I don't, every
Yeah,
once in a while I get a grumble, but I don't actually go, oh boy, I'm hungry. It's more like, hey, it's time to eat, let's have something, you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, the goal in general, and we're not kind of trying to do like hard and fast rules because it's
Hmm.
basically about sort of finding what works for you.
Okay.
Normally, if you have a couple of options. If you really, really want the coffee, like as your first thing, then we'll usually suggest if you can get yourself back to a lot less cream with the coffee or some milk or black. I don't do black. I decided that for me, I moved my coffee and I have it with my meal around 10 or 10:30 because I didn't want to have it black. It bothers my stomach. So I was like, no,
Hmm.
no, so there's options. You can have it black, you can have a little less in it, like, a tablespoon or two, like, you want less than around 50 calories.
Hmm.
Um, or you can move it and put it with your meal. Like there's lots of options there. Uh,
Okay.
the thing with the high fat or keto background, and I was like low carb, high fat before I came here, but I wasn't losing much of anything. And
No, I
I was
stalled.
overdoing the fat. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
that's me. I stalled, and I think it's because I'm doing too high fat. I think the high fat has done whatever it can do for me, and that
yeah,
now I have to shift gears. And that's how I found Marty, was that desire to shift gears and figure out what takes me to A, my goal, and B, back to a normal lifestyle.
yeah. And that's the really, really good thing here is with doing the lower carb, I mean, that's in a good place because you're not sort of overfilling the carb fuel tank. And one thing you'll find through the process is you'll dial in, if your carbs are good for you, you'll find that this process, you won't get the post-meal spike as much, but you'll find it's taking longer to reach your trigger. And that's the fat part of it. And over time, as you're chasing your trigger, you'll naturally start to realize that, oh, if I have a little bit less fat with this meal, I can reach my trigger sooner and not go all day without eating.
Okay.
And so that's sort of like if your blood glucose goes too high in the first couple hours after a meal, you need to ease back on the carbs. But if it stays high too long and you can't get back to your trigger, then that's the fat, right? So you gradually start working that back, and that's what the trigger nudges you to. And you may end up, if you're eating 3 meals a day, you may end up eating 2, or you start changing the composition. And DDF focuses on the timing and not overfilling your tanks. And then once you've got that down, a lot of people will move on to macros and kind of realize, oh, if I up my protein a little bit more, get my carbs kind of in this window, and then tweak back the fat just a little. It's just about moving the dial or the lever just enough that you're satisfied, that you're getting what you need, that you're getting the nutrients, and you're not overfilling, you're not eating more energy than you really, really need. And so
Okay.
that's kind of the big picture.
Yeah, that makes sense to me though, because, like my trigger is 93 and I wake up in the morning and I'm somewhere at like 95 or 91, I'm like floating in there. So I'm kind of waking up right there. But what I have noticed is on a morning like that, I wake up where I'm say 103, like this morning, it took till 2:30 this afternoon to be able to have a meal because it like crept down, like it was taking so long. And that's the fat. That's what you're saying me. That means that the last meal I had was too high fat and it was keeping those numbers up like artificially long, right? Is that,
Yeah.
am I understanding it?
Yeah.
Okay. So then my next
Yeah.
question becomes, every other morning I like to go for a walk real early before I go to work. And I walk for about an hour. And on the weekends, one weekend day, I'll take a 2-hour walk, not power walking or anything, like really just strolling, just to
Yep.
move my body, fresh air, be outside, that kind of stuff. So I found that like some mornings I got up and my number was 97 and I'm like, okay, so I'm not near the trigger. I'm not ready to eat. I'm going to go for the walk. I got back for my 2-hour walk and my blood sugar was now 103. So I'm like, damn, now I have to wait even longer. And I didn't feel hungry. And then when I did start to feel a little hungry, when I tested, I was like down at 78. Like at some point I like shot down. So should I have eaten after I got home from should I have like had a little bit of something because I knew I had done all that exercise? I wasn't really sure because I wasn't sure that 79 or 78 where I ended up was a great place to be after the walk, or because I felt okay, it didn't matter. I didn't know.
Yeah, well, and normally, like once you've done this for a little bit, one thing is, like I say, like we usually won't be checking the waking glucose that much unless you feel hungry. So like if you wake up and it's below your trigger, but you don't feel hungry, then we normally don't say to check that. You only check it to confirm that you're hungry.
Then excuse me
So
for just a second. So am I going to get to the point where I don't have to do like a waking blood glucose anymore? Like I won't even think about that anymore?
Well,
Really?
you don't have to, like the first 3 days, we do the waking blood glucose for
Right.
our baseline, and the
Okay.
last 3 days. And then I think it's on Tuesday, we'll have Monday or Tuesday, we'll have a week where we're dialing in the late night eating where we check the waking blood glucose. But right now, until Tuesday or Wednesday, you don't have to check your waking at all. And then the rest of the challenge, except this week coming up for the eating window, except for this week coming up on, I think, Tuesday, you don't have to check your waking for the rest of the challenge. It's so, yeah. you just have to test, and if you're not having probably spikes above the 1.6 or 30 milligrams per deciliter, so you don't have to check your post meal either. It's just your pre-meal.
Yeah, no, I doing the high fat keto, my doctor says that not that he wouldn't call me insulin resistant, but he said that I've reversed it and that I now have to keep moving, to finish healing and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like that's a good thing, and that's what I'm trying to like stay focused on. The problem I had that when I started the program and the baseline eating and stuff, because I realized that now I could start to incorporate like a few more carbs. There didn't seem to be restriction. I ended up binging on carbs one night. I went like berserk with strawberries. Like I lost my mind, the lesser of evils, obviously, but still not a good place to go. So I'm like, no, so you still have a problem with sugar and insulin, so you got to watch it. But okay, so basically I really only have to test, wait till I feel hungry, test, look at what that number is. That number is going to tell me eat or don't eat. If it's not at my trigger, hold off, wait till you feel a little hungrier, test again. If you're at your trigger, have your meal and just move on from there. But don't do the obsessing, constantly having to test like we were doing before, or I was doing before with the program that I was with.
No, don't do that. And that
Okay.
is in general what you need to do.
Okay.
I will add that with your workouts in the morning, if you wake up and you feel good, it's like get up, go do your workout. And that's the whole concept of the main meal also, is that if you want the main meal around your exercise, you can do your walk and say, I feel hungry. I'm going to eat and not test. And
Okay.
then later in the day, when you feel hungry again, then you will test to see if you meet trigger for those meals. And that will set you up with enough protein and nutrients to help settle down your glucose.
Okay. Okay. And
So,
sooner or later, I should start to be able to identify hunger, right? Because I don't really identify hunger. So like, I don't
yeah.
know.
And
Like I have to wait until like my brain hurts,
Yeah, no, it'll take a while. Some
Okay.
people notice in a few challenges, some people take months. Everybody's different, right? So
Okay.
that's the thing. It'll take time. Do some slow changes. I know our brain is like, I want this next week. And it's like, well, just gentle, because we want to help change over the habits that will carry you through the long term.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, you're doing great. And like I say, this is your first one. Just hang on, read the stuff, do the daily lessons. If it feels overwhelming, skip the extra stuff and just do your pre-meal testing and do, like I say, add in your main meal around your exercise, like more protein and nutrients, not too much carbs and fat. And then test your other meals and then forget about the rest. And then the next time you can, take in a little bit more because it'll be familiar.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. You've really cleared up a lot of things for me. Thank you.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, no, I was the same way. I was eating like 3 times more fat than I needed when I started here. And over time, I dialed back my fat a bit. My carbs were already good. And I increased my protein some. And since I started here, March 17th of last year, and I'm down 60 pounds. And I couldn't
Nice.
lose a thing. I could not lose a thing. And I had type 2 diabetes, so I was keeping it under control by cutting my carbs, but it wouldn't, the second I ate carbs, my glucose was off the charts. So I was like, that's not fixing the diabetes. And Marty's stuff on the personal fat threshold is what changed my life. So.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's an amazing amount of help tonight. Thank you so much.
No worries. If you have any other questions, do drop them into the feed in the challenge. And there's always somebody around like Muffy or Bob or one of our other moderators, or myself, like Will or Marty himself will pop in and definitely help out because it takes a while to learn. This is a different way of thinking, but it's like, it's magic when it starts working, right? So it's good.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
No worries. We have a couple other comments here in the chat I'll read, and if anybody else has any questions, we've got about 10 minutes left. Let me see. Marge said, oh yeah, Lee, if you have coffee with cream, it will keep up your glucose. Yes, it will. Colleen said, I've tried a few different ways, but making breakfast my main meal a day, often fish, but not always, has helped some similar things fall in line. And Eileen suggests use the day 10 and eat earlier. That's definitely what I do. And oh, and Lisa, thank you for all your help. I really want to get healthy. You're definitely in the place to do that. Okay. So, Muffy, any thoughts, any wisdom you'd like to impart?
No. I will say that it took me I mean, I've been doing this a long time, but it took me forever to recognize when I was hungry. That was the hardest part for me. Food is abundant. We can have food whenever we want. And to suddenly say, okay, now I got to figure out when I'm hungry. Now I
Yes.
know for sure, but boy, it took me forever. And my signals are pretty subtle, except when I've been teaching swimming. And then it's just, I am, raging. And so my daughter has said, Mom, you've got to take a protein snack to the pool. So when you're driving home, you can just munch on some protein. I'm like, thanks. Which is true.
Good. It is true. Well, and my thing is my normal traditional hunger signals, because I was so overweight and I was eating a lot of fat, my normal hunger signals, when I feel hungry and my stomach's growling and I'm like, I really want to eat something, that happens when my glucose is, if my trigger was, 4.5, then I would be feeling hungry at about 5.1. And it's like, so I still have another hour and a half before I need to eat based on my body. But the thing is my set point, I'm used to overfeeding it, right? But when I get to my trigger, when I'm running low on glucose, I start to kind of feel like I might pass out. So then it's, and then it's all good. I'm not talking to you, Bob. Um, Anyway, but like I say, it'll take time. Some people will notice it over time. And it's basically treat DDF as a really, really fun experiment and say, I'm going to learn, my body's going to tell me what works and how it needs to have things. And this is, it's not somebody else's plan. It's not what somebody else is telling you. This is your body saying, please feed me these nutrients. Please give me this amount, and I will do what I can to give you health. And so then at that point, it's, you'll learn over time. And so it's like there's no right or wrong. There's no perfect or not perfect. If your numbers are a lot higher than everybody else's, don't feel ashamed. We all started high and we got better. And you will too. It's just follow the daily process and go easy on yourself with your expectations, and you'll get there. Does Bob, as Eileen Incognito, have any other comments they want to add? Now that we've run this whole show.
No, you've been doing
I told them you bailed on them.
fooled you.
Your sound is
no,
wacky, Bob.
Yeah, that's okay. It's
That's the
Zoom
best
is
I
hard
can
to
do.
do. Perfect. Well, thanks, Bob, for popping in. I hope the granddaughter did well.
Everything's good, thanks.
Oh, good. Does anybody else have any last minute questions? We have about 5 more minutes. If you have any burning things that you need to know or want to ask, if not, you can always ask them in the feed at any time, night or day, and somebody will eventually pop in and provide an answer.
Belinda?
Yes, dear.
When I'm on the Tableau and it says that I can click on a recipe and see an image of it, I can see where it says image, and then when I move my mouse over to it to click on it, it disappears. So what am I doing wrong if I want to be able to see a recipe? How do I see a recipe?
Oh, you see. We don't have access to the recipes in DDF for the people that are just doing DDF. Let me see. I can pull up optimizing nutrition and background. The computer's slow when it's on Zoom. I don't know if this will open up or if it'll blow up Zoom. We'll see. Okay. All right. So you're saying,
I want to be able to click on one of those symbols.
okay.
Oh, it says view image, view recipe. Mine has just said view image. And then when I move my mouse over, that
Are you on a phone or a computer?
computer,
Okay. Yeah, because view image.
there's a nice image.
It might have been maybe it was a glitch in the.
So just try it again. It's a better day.
Yep. Let me see.
I
View
know.
image and view recipe. Maybe they were doing an update or something. There's the recipe there.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting and hoping to see. I'll try it again. Thank you.
Well, and there might be. Let me close that off. There might be a. Was it with Paleo or Primal Wellness? I think was the website. I know there's one of the websites that some of the recipes are coming from. There was an issue. I don't know if the website was down for a bit or if they were doing an update, but some people couldn't open some of them there. And so if that's the case, that might be what it was. But otherwise, it should open now, but maybe it was just an update.
I'll just try it again. Thank you for an excursion out of
Yeah,
the.
well, let us know in macros there if you're still having trouble and we can kind of poke through and see like the specific recipes or whatnot and try and get you going into some good stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. All right, well, I guess that's one more week with Marty not here, but he'll be back next week. No fear, Marty will be back and have lots of questions for him and make him feel needed and useful. And also, just to pre-warn you, next week is fine, but the week after next, March 16th, so not next week, but the week after. So March 16th, if you're taking any courses here, every course starting March 16th for the rest of the summer is going to shift an hour later than it is now. Next week will be the same time on March 9th, but March 16th onward, if you observe daylight savings, all of the course, all the lives will be 1 hour later. Marty doesn't do daylight savings. That's why there's that swap. I got really messed up in November, when we had it switch over. And he was like, mine didn't change. And like, yeah, you don't have daylight savings. So anyway, that's just to pre-warn you. Next week is fine, but starting on the 16th, they will be an hour later. So I hope you have a good week. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the questions. And like I say, the live Q&As are recorded and they will be in the course content area under the live Q&As probably in a few hours. It just takes them some time to spool them and pop them back in again. So thank you. Have a great week and keep on watching your trigger. Bye.
Thank you.